Now that I've been out here in Sweden for 2.5 years, I've had plenty of time to reflect on all of the things that I really like about this country, all the things that it's taught me. Don't get me wrong, I really like living back in the UK as well, but as any of you guys will know, if you've also lived abroad, it really opens your eyes up to the way that things can be done differently, and sometimes even in better ways. And for that very reason, I thought it'd be fun in this video today to count down some of the things I've been grateful for since I moved to Sweden. Some of the things that I've seen and thought, actually, you know what, these guys are doing this really well, and I'm really glad that I got to experience it and it's improved my life in some way. So if you're looking for a bit of a pep talk to remind you why Sweden is a great place to be, after all, you have come to the right place today, guys. So grab hold of those flower crowns and make sure you've got your IKEA meatballs at the ready. We're about to dive in deep. Number one, and what felt like the only place I could start this video today, is the fact that here in Sweden, everything runs so smoothly. We've talked about some of these things before in other videos, but you have to admit, things like Swish for being able to transfer money to another number very simply, the fact that buses run on time most of the time, and if you've lived in Sweden for a while yourself, or you've watched a handful of my videos, you'll get a good idea why this is absolutely not rocket science at all. There's not one thing that I can point to with this particular item on the list today, because it's just the way that all sorts of services, for example, here in Sweden, really seem to run well together, and they really seem to have got that sorted. I mean, look at buses, for example. In the majority of cases, they're running on time. The same with trains. Look at Bank ID. It lets you verify your identity online without having to use, for example, a driving license or your passport. The same with your personnummer, which loops together all of the services that you need to access from the state with just one number. And then you can do whatever you want. Something that really got me reflecting on this point for the first time was when I spoke to a friend from the Netherlands who lives here in Sweden. His girlfriend is also Swedish, and she actually moved to join him in the Netherlands before they moved back together. And he said it was so much harder for her to get into society in the Netherlands because there was so much paperwork for everything. If you wanted a driving license, if you wanted to be registered at the doctor's surgery, if you needed to get your tax number, it was all different forms, all different numbers, and impossible to keep track of. Then enter Sweden with their one string of digits, the personnummer, which is literally your happy pill for everything you could possibly want to do. Ironically, getting hold of one of these mysterious personnummers isn't always that straightforward. But once you've got it, it's like the key to the treasure trove. You have got a gateway of opportunities in front of you, and they just make it really, really smooth and simple. Talking of keeping things simple leads me on to the second thing on my list here today of the things that I'm super grateful for since I moved to Sweden, and that's learning how to make the most out of the winter. And I can't deny by this point that winter has made its way into a number of my videos for various different reasons, but today the point I want to make is that since moving to Sweden, I learned that actually the winter doesn't have to be a bad time of year. There's all sorts of different opportunities that you can make the most of then too. In England, when it gets cold and dark, we just want to wrap ourselves up inside and hibernate until it gets a little bit warmer again, whereas here in Sweden, they chuck on their puffer jackets, get their beanies, get those really thick gloves, and they head out like it's any normal day of the week. And let's be honest, it's easy to see how this happens because there's lots of people here in Sweden that live up in the north as well, and there the winter lasts a hell of a lot longer. So if you're not prepared to go out and make the most of the day and catch what's out there to be had, then you're going to be staying inside for a long time. Take this last winter as an example. It got down to minus 20 degrees for several weeks at a time where I'm living here in Sweden. But rather than sit inside, wrapped up warm, feeling sorry for myself, I did as the Swedes do, and I picked up my coat, picked up my thermos of coffee and my fika, and headed out into the storm, or the snow as it actually turned out to be. And I spent so much time just hiking around, being outside, enjoying the nature, prepared for the conditions, skating, skiing. There's so many different opportunities to be had. So yes, I guess you could say that I am grateful to Sweden for teaching me that there are beautiful sides of winter too. Because I remember when I first moved here and I had a lot of international friends in the beginning, they gave me the impression that winter was something I should resent. They almost made me fear it or kind of be a bit scared that it was going to happen. I almost wanted it to just pass me by because they made me feel like all it was going to be was a dark time of year where I just wanted to stay away from the outside world. Whereas once I learned to embrace it the way the Swedes do, suddenly there were all sorts of new memories to create, and these days, now I see the real positives of it too. Talking about seeing the positives, the third thing on my list today is something that I've spent the last 6 months trying to avoid talking about here on this channel. Can you guess what P word I might be talking about? Yes, it's the pandemic that I mean, of course, and unless you've been living under a rock, you will definitely know that Sweden's attitude to the pandemic has been very different to lots of other parts of the world. Sweden has never been in a lockdown, even a year and a half later. We've had restrictions, but lots of them are based on recommendations and goodwill. There's not been the same kind of enforcement that we've seen in other parts of the world. And whilst I'm not here today to weigh in on the debate as to whether Sweden did the right or the wrong thing during the pandemic, because I feel like a lot of people have already had their say on that already, it does bring up a really good point for me, and that's the fact that there's a big reliance here on social responsibility. We've seen it with the pandemic and we've seen it elsewhere in life as well. And when I talk about social responsibility, I'm referring to the way that here in Sweden they expect people to really understand what is morally the right decision to make in different scenarios. It's the same reason, for example, why the concept of pant exists, to encourage people to recycle, and the same reason that the state has monopoly and regulates alcohol consumption, because they expect people to drink responsibly, and we've seen it with the pandemic as well. And as someone who's still a relative outsider to Sweden, who is still quite new, it's been quite an eye-opening experience for me to live the whole pandemic here, because when I've seen, for example, my home country locking down and enforcing certain regulations to make sure people don't meet, here in Sweden it's felt at times like they've just asked nicely and expected people to do the right thing. And in the majority of circumstances, I'm sure people have. And it really makes you recognise that here in Sweden there's a lot of faith and trust in public services and in doing the right thing because it morally feels like it's the thing you're supposed to do. And as I say, I'm under no impression that there aren't exceptions and there are people that have still flouted the rules, but there's something we can learn there, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be treated like an adult and expected to do what's right in all sorts of different circumstances. As a native English speaker, the fourth thing on my list today of the things I'm grateful for since moving to Sweden is the language. And don't get me wrong, you guys, I know this one isn't unique to Sweden. It's the same wherever you move in the world where they speak a different language to your own. But what an opportunity is it to get to learn a new language in the country where they speak it, because it's just so different to learning it back home. I remember learning French and Spanish, for example, in school, and you kind of get to a certain boundary and then you can't go much higher because you're not using it enough to really practice and learn, even if you're watching TV and listening to the radio. Since moving to Sweden, I've noticed my Swedish come on leaps and bounds, and it's really eye-opening to get to communicate in a different language and really get to put it into use. So yes, I guess you could say that I'm really grateful for the fact that Sweden opened my eyes to a whole new language and a whole new way to express myself, and as I'm learning to use it and to apply it in my daily life, I'm enjoying it even more and more. And I have to say, I'm proud of the fact that I've continued with my language learning, because as you'll know if you know anything about Sweden, the Swedes speak amazing English, so you can get by here without speaking a word of Swedish, but I've really tried to persevere because I'm planning to be here for the long haul, and I wanted to make sure that I could really speak some of the basics of the language. And now seeing that progress be made, being able to participate in conversations and make myself understood, it just feels fantastic, and I would encourage everyone to give it a go. Make sure if you don't have a second language that you start today. And that leads me on nicely to the fifth and final thing that I'm grateful for since moving to Sweden, and that's A-kassa. Whilst it's not something that I want to be using anytime soon, A-kassa is a provision that they have here in Sweden that you can buy into. It's basically a monthly subscription that protects your salary. So what that means is if you lose your job tomorrow or you get made redundant, you can actually get yourself covered so that you continue to earn a salary while you're looking for a new job. Just like a lot of other countries, Sweden has what is called statutory coverage when it comes to your salary. So if you lose your job, you get a state benefit which covers a certain sum of your salary from the month. But then with this insurance that I'm talking about, this A-kassa, then you can actually top that back up to 80% of your normal salary. So for a period after you lose your job or you're out of work, you can continue to earn money just for the fact that you are continuing to look for a new role. And I really wanted to sneak this one into this video somewhere because I get so many questions from those of you guys that are looking to move to Sweden, and you ask about what it's like to get a job and how you go about going through the interview process, for example. But it got me thinking, one thing that you don't think about is what about if you unexpectedly find yourself out of work? And something that I'd never heard of before I came to Sweden is this A-kassa fund. In fact, I don't think we even have it in the UK. So I really encourage you, if you're new to Sweden or you've recently got a job, look up the A-kassas that are available, see if there's one that comes with your uni, and it's well worth signing up for. Just a small monthly subscription, and then suddenly you are going to be getting yourself supported if the worst happens. And that's just the start. There's so many things that I'm grateful for here in Sweden, and I could only get through 5 of them today. If you liked this video and you'd like to see me talk about more of the things I'm grateful for here in Sweden in the future, future, drop me a like and then let me know down in the comment section below what things are you grateful for about living here in Sweden. Sometimes we take our countries for granted, so let's really take the moment to appreciate what is it that makes it good to live here in Sweden, what are we thankful for. Let me know down in the comments below, and maybe you'll even brighten up somebody else's day. And with that, I'd like to say if you want to help brighten up my day, you can subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Turn on that bell, then you'll be the first person to know as soon as I put out a new video. Really appreciate all the support. Thank you for always watching, commenting, supporting, subscribing. You guys are the best, and until I see you next time, have an awesome day. Goodbye, guys.